Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember right. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, the secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and I am delighted that you are joining me either live now as we stream across YouTube and Facebook and X, or maybe you're watching the video streams later where they're archived there, or just listening to the show on one of the many podcast platforms that this show goes out on every Wednesday. But thank you. So wherever you are, I'm, as I said, delighted to have you. I'm hoping that this week we don't have the same kind of technical crisis or attack on our tech like we did last week when we interviewed the legendary Alan Greenfield talking about the Black Lodge. And for the first 10 minutes, my sound wouldn't work, my camera went, my green screen went and stayed gone for the whole screen. Never, for the whole episode, had never seen anything like it. But Alan Greenfield had warned me whenever he talks about the Black Lodge on podcasts, serious technical difficulties strike. Thank you to everybody in chat last week for letting me know when the audio wasn't working and bearing with me. I'm hoping that we don't have any kind of problems approximating that this week, and I'm fairly confident we won't, although we will be talking about the early days of UFO belief. And the author and ufologist we've been talking about, Donald Keyhoe, was one of the first people to popularize the idea of a silence group. And certainly during one of his broadcasts, he was cut off. His microphone was pulled when he went off script when he was on television. So anyway, let's get into our guest though, who's joining me to chat about Keyhoe tonight. He's a long-time fan of the history, both the kind they teach in school and the history they want kept hidden. He lives in a 116-year-old haunted home in Racine, Wisconsin, with his wife, Barb, 4 Alaskan Malamutes, and a cat that controls his life. He's the producer of the film MILWAUKEE Mafia, Frank BALISTRIERI, and he's also the author of several books ranging from fiction through true crime and UFOs to gambling tips. His most recent book, published by Critical Blast, is Paranormal Files, The Flying Saucers Are Real, which we'll be talking about at some length tonight. So I'm delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird my dear friend, Wayne Clingman. Greetings, Wayne.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. It's great to have you here, man.
Pleasure's mine, sir.
So what's been new since I think I last saw you at Milwaukee Paracon in person, right?
Yeah, it was fun. Meet you there. All there was a nice time. You gave a great lecture. Actually, lovely lecture.
Thank you. I could talk about Shaver till the cows come home, as you well know.
That whole fascinating, the whole early history of the UFO phenomena is so fascinating to me.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, because I know we share a common interest in it. And as I mentioned, we're going to be, I guess, primarily talking about Donald Keyhoe, but we're likely to go off the rails and go all over the place, as you and I tend to, because we share we have a shared interest in the weird and the unusual.
What fascinates me about Mr. Keyhoe is he was a Marine veteran of 2 World Wars, right? Came back from being injured after a flight accident after the First World War, served in the Second World War. In the interwar years, he hung out with Admiral Byrd, a great man of great valor, and no, that's the Mafia guy. I'm sorry, the guy that flew to Paris.
Lindenberg,
right? And who both got high rank in the military as time went on. He knew people. He's not some random drunk in a bar. He knew people. He saw things. He talked about things. And people didn't like that.
And he, of course, his background too, he had a military background, right? He was in the Marines.
Corps, yeah.
He was a major in the Marines, I think, by the time he retired.
Yeah. You right as a Marine, which is no mean feat. I mean, you can't, you trained pilots, so you got to know, and he was a big aviation guy. So he knew his airplanes. He talked to pilots. He knew the weather. He knew what was going around him. And he took interest in things because of an article he wrote for True Magazine. Again, that upset people. Even upset people with Project Blue Book.
Well, that's where he first wrote the book we're going to be talking about today, which you've re-released with Critical Blast with some of your own notes and a wonderful introduction and afterward, is Flying Saucers. The Flying Saucers Are Real. And that initially was an article, as you just said, in True Magazine. And then that was so successful. Some people at the time suggested it was one of the most successful magazine articles ever written and one of the most widely read and shared magazine articles ever written. So Keyhoe developed that into a longer format book, which was Flying Saucers, The Flying Saucers Are Real, which was one of the early books within this space,
Yes.
right?
He would also go on in his life to write other books as well on UFOs. He was very interested in UFOs. He started one of the first civilian groups researching UFOs. We can talk about the financial problems that group had, how much of them were legitimate, and how much of those financial problems were instigated by other groups. Don't know. But yeah, he has quite the life, quite the interesting guy.
Yeah, Keyhoe, of course, also, and some people would bring this up later in his life, he actually had a background in writing for horror and science fiction pulps as well. Much like Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver, he'd written in Weird Tales, he'd written in various other pulp magazines. So he already had one foot in the science fiction world before the UFO story or the flying saucer story broke in the mid to late 1940s.
His first love was aviation. So, which carries really over into UFOs because what's flying around there? What are people seeing? And that goes all the way back to the Second World War. With people seeing what they call Foo Fighters. What's a Foo Fighter? Why are we seeing them? What's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting. Presumably, and I believe the story is that Keyhoe still did have those type of, perhaps because he had a background in the Marines and he was probably, perhaps because of that, granted more access, or perhaps military people were more comfortable speaking to him. I think he heard a lot of those type of stories relatively firsthand when he was writing that article for True.
I agree. I mean, he was known to have a willing ear to listen. And he knew the difference between somebody telling a story, you muted yourself. Somebody telling a story and somebody bullshitting.
Well, so I mean, obviously, it's an incredibly important book. Is that what drew you to Keyhoe? Like, what was the thing that made you want to I suppose reissue the Keyhoe book and include your own commentary in there?
I thought it was important that we get to know history. I don't think we have a clue what's going on today until we go all the way back, look at what's happened then, look at what's happened to everyone going forward. What is it that we can learn? What is it that we need to find out? Let's separate the wheat from the shaft.
I think that's a good point, because I think back then, much of what we see today with congressional hearings and, Pentagon spokespeople and this type of renewed interest in flying saucers or UFOs or UAPs, as they are called today, much of the belief that's come out since the New York Times story in 2017 about the Tic Tac videos and the revelations that the Pentagon had this secret kind of study group looking at UAPs, was that the government knows all of this stuff, and if we push them hard enough, we're going to get the answers. Of course, that dates back to Keyhoe. That's exactly what Keyhoe was saying in his books.
Yeah.
His books, maybe there was a conspiratorialism in them. They certainly got more conspiratorial as he went along. But in the book you've reissued, The Flying Saucers Are Real, his point is essentially, well, the US Air Force knows that these things are extraterrestrial, but they don't want to create a panic, is why they're not telling the US public. There was not like an X-Files conspiracy. There was no deals with aliens and alien abductions and secret underground bases and all the kind of this stuff. It was conspiratorial, but it wasn't as it kind of opened the way that ufology would go in. But at that stage, it hadn't gone full X-Files. But still, it's very much again like today, where if we push the government enough, they know the secrets. They're going to tell us it's extraterrestrial.
Especially when we get done blaming the Air Force and went after the CIA. And again, in my opinion, that upset people. And we know for a fact that the Air Force, even back in the 40s, is up to no good. And again, the question I have is why? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm in two more. I'm in a few different minds. I suppose one of my ideas might be not that unlike Keyhoe's initial position. Not that I think they knew they were extraterrestrial necessarily, but maybe they wanted to present a front-facing idea of authority and controlling the skies, and the last thing they wanted was the US public running around thinking that there was some kind of threat which the US Air Force wasn't on top of. So the Robertson panel had suggested something similar, where they had said during a time of war or crisis, you could get telecommunication lines getting panicked. This is something the Soviets could take advantage of. It's dangerous for national security. So there was this idea, I think, by various government agencies to play down the flying saucer phenomenon. So on that level, Keyhoe was probably right. Whether they're extraterrestrial or not, on that level, he was probably correct.
Well, it's interesting too, when you go back all the way to the 40s on up, the Air Force is lying from the get-go. Later on, they do all kinds of things to make people sound insane. In fact, they drove one guy insane. They purposely drove a man insane to do it. But yet nobody goes to jail for this shit. I don't get that. I don't get why people with Air Force intelligence did not go insane. Did not go to jail, I'm sorry. When the poor guy, they drove insane. I mean, it's destroyed his life to do it.
Yeah, Benowitz with the whole stuff surrounding Benowitz's initial reports to Kirtland Air Force Base that he'd seen something on the base he thought was extraterrestrial and picked up messages he thought was extraterrestrial, but he'd bumped into a secret government program, so they spun his belief that it was UFOs to further confuse him and take him away from the reality of what he discovered. And he certainly did end up in an institution. Whether he had that root of paranoia anyway, and that's why he thought it was ET, but certainly it didn't help the shenanigans of various intelligence agencies, including the AFOSI, like you said, and supposedly the CIA and the NSA were involved as well. So who knows?
Yeah, some interesting individuals were involved in all that stuff too, right? And again, I need to be polite and use the proper verbiage. Excuse me if I do not. We have golden cows, golden calves that we worship as gods, right? Maybe some of these golden calves that we worship as gods aren't all that. Maybe they're involved from the word get-go. They're trying to create something to take advantage of. I mean, we know that in my opinion, Blue Book was an operation to confuse the public.
it's interesting to. I think one of the questions too, and it's probably worth covering, although it's not really in Keyhoe's book, but in some of his later books, there's the idea that there's a silence group by his later books. That there is some what we might call it. Well, they were already being called the Men in Black, but that isn't the term he uses. That there's an active government intent within some agencies or within one agency to silence UFO witnesses or to keep the lid on what's happening with UFOs. There is actually a bona fide conspiracy to hide UFO secrets. And that perhaps that emerges in Keyhoe's writings as he goes along. That idea becomes more prominent, and then that segues, into the kind of the paranoia of the 70s into the 80s, and then you get X-Files, right? But I think back to Blue Book, I wonder, it is something else I think about. Was Blue Book just a front-facing group, and was there other things that Blue Book itself didn't know about, whether it was extraterrestrial or whether it was secret government test programs, or was that just their public relations group essentially, and was everything else the real secrets kept by some other deeper department hidden back in back offices that had no interactions with the public at all?
I think we go back to the Robertson panel, we find out that they were told they had to present certain facts, they had to create something. There was something in mind. And from that moment on, everything going forward was part of that. What do we need to do to make sure this is our end result?
And I think that was probably policy for some time going forward, I think. And I also think some of the, and this gets into the Benowitz story that we were just talking about, I think some of it does become that flying saucers are a useful tool of disinformation, whether it's the Benowitz affair or whether it's spinning stories around a secret test facility like Area 51. I think if you tell people, or if you don't even have to tell them, you have to just, as soon as the stories begin, you can just let them keep spinning or add a little spin yourself, that they're testing down flying saucers back engineered out of this base. Then when people report strange lights in the sky, there's a component of the public which has been so mystified by this type of talk that they think it's all extraterrestrial. Well, you're happy for them to be believing that because you're really testing some other state-of-the-art thing. You also might be happy that the Soviets or that the Chinese or whoever, well, the Soviets back then, not anymore, the Russians today, right? You might also be happy if you were running these type of spin operations or psyops or disinfo campaigns or whatever they are. You might be happy that there are foreign governments that are going like, what on earth? Do they have something? What's going on there? Like, it does muddy the waters for anybody looking at it.
Yeah. We can understand doing certain things to protect America. We understand this, right? But driving someone insane, I don't think qualifies for that. I think the cattle mutilations, were they cattle mutilations or were they testing cattle to see if they're hurt by radiation? Have you read the book Miracle Man? Mirage Man, I'm sorry, the Mirage Man.
Oh yeah, and there's the wonderful documentary as well, of course.
I mean, they go in that detail, those cattle being cut up, and the parts they cut out would be the same parts they would remove from the animal to test them for radiation poisoning. Interesting. But let's not tell the farmer we're concerned about this, because that's give us liability issues. Let's make something happen.
Yeah, the cattle mutilations are another kettle of fish, I guess, altogether. I wonder what I'm trying to think of. Did Keyhoe ever write about? Because there was cattle mutilations, then Snippy the horse, of course, which was actually Lady the horse, but Snippy was a catchier name. I think Snippy was the mother and Lady was the daughter, or vice versa. And the one that had been mutilated that became front page was misidentified as Snippy. But that was an early cattle mutilation story, which certainly I think would have come to light when Keyhoe was still involved in the field. Keyhoe didn't die, I think, until 1988 or something, but he'd kind of dropped out of the field really by the early 70s, having some minor involvement.
Keyhoe later he'd end up dying in a nursing home because he was not quite with us mentally, right? So he's dying in a nursing home. He's not with us mentally. It's his nice home. It's this nice laid out room in his home with all his files. His files are well organized. They're kept away from everything else. They're behind lock and key. You have to break in his home They have to find out the room, break into that before you can do anything with the files. After he dies, someone or ones broke into that home, broke into his filing cabinets, and stole his records. When he was in that nursing home, being senile, they could have bought those records probably from his family members who could care a damn.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's that book he led me to read. The biography that's come out of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think last year the biography came out, or 2023, I think, right?
It's a pretty good book. I recommend it. I recommend The Mirage Man too. I mean, all the books that are out there written by, I don't see use the word legitimate, but good reputable writers who check their facts and give you the information are well worth reading. I mean, there's books out there that aren't worth your time of day. But thankfully, there's good books that are, and that would be one of them.
Yeah, there is a field which is very messy, you know, as far as when you try to do research, because I suppose if you just enter it as somebody with a vague interest and you look online for UFO books, it's difficult to decide what books somebody should pick up. I, of course, always recommend, near the top of my list is Greg Bishop's Project Beta, which is about the Paul Benowitz affair and about those type of other stories circulating around. I still think Project Beta is, when you're looking at the type of stories we're talking about tonight, government cover-up and, you know, potential, you know, misadventures by various intelligence agencies, I don't think there's a better book than Bishop's, just because it's so detailed and it really encapsulates the crazy that was going on there. And Bishop's one of those people you were talking about. He's a meticulous researcher. He's such an incredible talent. So I would also recommend that. Greg Bishop's Project Beta, if somebody wants to get an incredible book about this kind of stuff.
And kudos for people out there doing it. I mean, absolutely, mega respect. I mean, for every God, I hate to use the word flake, but I will. For every 100 flakes out there that write a book, there's 2 or 3 people out there who are doing the job that needs to be done. But I want to congratulate everybody out there who's trying to do the best job they know how. Absolutely.
So how do you see that the UFO fields change since Keyhoe penned The Flying Saucers Are Real up to today, with the most recent, you know, the second round of congressional hearings and the general public and government kind of perceptions of and discussions that are being had today? What do you think, there's been much of a change, or what do you think's happened in that period?
I think now with the drones being sighted, I think we have a new round of crazy going on. If anybody sees a light in the sky, it has to be a drone. The drones can't be from here; they have to be from another planet. Oh my God, they're taking over nuclear bases. I'm sorry, they're not taking over nuclear bases. That's not happening. And those drones that we can't catch, if we didn't shoot one of them down, we would. Obviously, we don't want to. The next question is why. If people are really, really worried about it, we shoot one down and find out what's going on. But they don't. Nobody. Military, I should say, not everybody. Military is not too concerned.
Well, of course, and that's something I didn't even mention then, and it's good you brought it up talking about drones, because there's been all of those sightings in New Jersey and New York of recent, and people saying they're seeing car-sized drones buzzing around up there.
I read an article on Twitter, which is not the best news source at all, but somebody on Twitter was claiming that they saw 70 drones fly out of the water and into space. You know, I'm thinking, okay, bud, what are you smoking? Man, but you don't. It's hard to sell a book when based on the facts as you see them. It's a lot easier to write a book and sell a book than make outrageous claims.
The undersea stuff is fascinating, though, like USOs or whatever they call them, which, of course, it doesn't. Today, we tend to think of that as something fairly recent with, you know, the Nimitz footage and the pilots who said they saw things coming in and out of the water now, and ongoing revelations in these Pentagon hearings, or rather these congressional hearings. But that idea goes again back to, as I always say, goes back to Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver, writing in the 40s into the early 50s. Ivan T. Sanderson wrote his book Invisible Residents, which I think was in the 60s or early 70s, and I think he even called them USOs. So the idea and people witnessing what appear to be that if you saw in the sky, you would say was an unidentified flying object or a flying saucer or a UAP. They seem to be what's the term that they use? Is it interdomain or whatever the term is, where it means it can go in the air and
Sure.
into the water, which you keep hearing thrown about in government discussions now. But now it's being given this kind of credence, like it all sounds very respectable and responsible, because they're talking about it, with military, officers in front of congressional hearings, etc. But this has been something which has been reported in ufology for a very long time. Indeed, William Cooper, the author of Behold a Pale Horse, that classic conspiracy UFO work. Bill Cooper, of course, met his end when he had a shootout with, I think, local law enforcement who were trying to file some, I don't know what, he had some warrant on him and he wouldn't go easily. But Bill Cooper was one of the most influential, I suppose, people in the UFO conspiracy field in the 80s into the 90s. And he talked about himself seeing this when he was in the Navy, an unidentified flying object coming out of the ocean or going into the ocean. Like, this idea has been in ufology for a long time, and it's often been kind of on the borders of respectability. But now, as you said, we're hearing it in drone reports, but now it's coming out in congressional hearings, the thing that these things are in the seas.
I've not read the congressional hearings yet, and I probably should do that. One thing I would recommend is somebody go to the site called the Black Vault, which is full of information from congressional hearings, lots of stuff generated by Freedom of Information Act requests that talk about all kinds of interesting things about the UFOs, who's doing what to who for how much. It's good stuff. It's all free. Again, it's called the Black Vault. I highly recommend the site. Highly recommend the site, the Black Vault. I can't say enough good things about it. But I mean, and again, we don't know what people are really seeing, because we don't know who these people are. I'm saying it wrong. I apologize. Who has seen what? When are they seeing them? Who is talking to them? Are we continuing to talk to them? The Navy pilots who claim to see certain things. When are we talking to them? Are we talking to them in the service, or do they disappear once they leave the service? Once their usefulness goes away, they're then shut up because they're not being paid to be the actor. Are they crisis actors? Is it all a role? You don't know. And that's kind of frightening.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that I give the benefit of the doubt to the pilots and, the naval commanders and the people that they roll out, to most of them anyway, who've just experienced or witnessed these things, because I think that they're almost, and total respect to them and for their service and everything, but I think to a degree they might almost be patsies. I think they have seen something. I think they have experienced something, but I think the only reason that they're kind of being allowed to come forward and say is because it's serving some kind of purpose. Yes. And I suspect what that purpose is that they themselves have experienced something which is our own technology being tested. Maybe not technology which people know about yet, but if you were going to test some state-of-the-art device to see how military pilots would perform if they encountered it, you would probably think about testing it on your own military first before risking it being shot down over China or something, right? Like, you would think, let's see how pilots respond to this technology that we have. And so when these pilots, I think in all sincerity, come out, these naval commanders come out and say, this isn't ours, this is nothing that we have, this is years beyond anything we have, I think they're being sincere, because they're not being briefed on what is being tested, out of Dreamland or Skunkworks or whatever the equivalent is today. They don't know what black budget projects are being tested today, any more than if you go back, to the time where, state-of-the-art aircraft were being flown in Bob Lazar's day and we were being told they were extraterrestrial flying saucers, that a pilot who had identified a flying triangle or, a stealth bomber or something then would have known what they were seeing, because they hadn't been briefed into it yet. They didn't know what it was yet. In fact, the CIA, back in the 1960s, their interior historian wrote about this afterwards. So not just a normal historian, somebody who's actually employed by the CIA to record their records and everything else. He wrote a paper, I think, was when I was doing my dissertation, so late 90s, early 2000s. He said that the CIA knew full well that something like 60% of flying saucer reports or UFO reports in America were people misidentifying things like, the U-2 and various other spy craft and things being tested in American skies. And they were happy for them to be reported as flying saucers because it muddied the water. It was better spin than the front page saying, civilians see state-of-the-art US spy plane being tested. It was better that somebody came out and said, I saw a flying saucer. So the CIA were happy with that. Now, I suspect, this is on a slightly different level, but I suspect, and I have no way of proving this, nobody's an expert really in this field, but I suspect that a lot of this technology that's being reported is not ours by military pilots, are military pilots who are totally aware of everything. We're flying everything. The Soviets have, or the Russians have, the Chinese have, everything else, but they don't know what the state-of-the-art black budget stuff is, which hasn't been, properly released yet. They'd have no idea what it is because they don't need to know. So that's my suspicion regarding that stuff anyway.
I believe you're correct. And it also puts this out to this as well. And perhaps these people who think they see something have not seen anything at all, but been dosed with something and been told they see something. I would not put that past the government either.
Well, I think there are, it's funny too, because when we say the government, it's easy to think of it as some, this monopolistic, force or power that controls everything. But the reality is there are all kinds of components within any modern enormous government. Let's be honest, there's none bigger than what we have in this country, probably. Unless maybe you went to, I don't know, China or somewhere. But we have an enormous government with so many different wings, so many different agencies, so many different compartments, a black budget that just disappears. Like whenever you can't even audit these people because there's so many billions of dollars, we don't know where the money went. So who knows what groups within groups within groups are doing. So they can even roll out a Secretary of Defense or an Undersecretary of Defense. And you can say, well, we didn't know anything about this. You probably don't know anything about it. You're probably not lying.
Right. In the front companies that they have, companies they created to generate money that they can spend freely without any accounting at all. That's all over. They have a job to do. What that job is necessarily, I don't have a clue, but it is crazy stuff.
So what do you think the UFO community should be doing? Because I don't think you write within this space. And you're interested in this space, much like I am, but I don't think you're necessarily a hardcore member of the UFO community any more than I am. So what do you think the UFO community is doing right, and what do you think it's doing wrong when it approaches this stuff?
See, that's the thing. Because we're the United States of America with freedom of speech, if someone wants to write a book and claim that UFOs are actually gypsies from Spain, go for it. Hope you sell a lot of them, right? Absolutely go for it. But people want to write a legitimate book should take the time to make sure they document whatever it is that they want to say is going on. Well, they say it's my opinion, right? So people know. And people can make judgments for themselves. More troubling, all the experts that want to claim, I worked here, I worked there. I was Area 51, and it was 15 stories in the ground. They had aliens running up and down. That should end, but you can't. But they're in it to sell a book. They're in it to sell a book, in it to be on TV, in it to make a movie, right? So I kind of expect that. That's kind of like disappointing, especially when they get a lot of play. If that made any sense.
No, I think that's the problem with a lot of the broader Fortean realm today. I think that's a lot of problem with as entertaining as paranormal television is, and UFO television is, and cryptozoological television is, and it goes the same for books. People consume it for entertainment as much as for information. At best, it's infotainment. Let's be honest. People, not much of the public want to read something which is super dry or watch something which is super dry. No matter how fact-filled it is, your average reader, your average viewer would prefer something which had, excitement in it, that something was just dry statistics and charts and, a dry history. But so I totally agree with you there. But there's something, there's some questions here that I'm going to throw at you, Wayne, from some of our regular viewers and listeners. One's from Foot Clan, and he says, does your guest, that's you, Wayne, have any knowledge about the potential breakaway civilization created by the black budget military and human civilizations on the moon or Mars, etc., or undersea, for instance?
No, I do not. But I will say this. Something very popular back in the day and coming back today, as we speak currently, is talk of people living underneath the earth. Now, there's people in the earth that underneath this earth, I don't know what we refer to, hollow earth, there's actually civilizations there. Later, last week or so, I found out that the largest ocean ever discovered is it's not on the Earth, it's under the Earth. That was amazing that it happened. Also amazing the number of early UFO researchers was also claimed to be caught and kept to the ground for a while. That's kind of interesting too. That's coming back as well. And I don't know why. But I don't myself have no knowledge of that. I apologize for not knowing so.
It's interesting you talk about a giant ocean under the Earth. I literally introduced my daughter last night to the classic 1950s cinematic adaptation of Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth with Pat Boone and who is he? What's his name? Charles Mason. Somebody. What's that actor's name? I forget now. Anyway, it's a. Sorry, what's that?
I said Kirk Douglas.
No. That he might have been another one of those. Kirk Douglas wasn't this, but it's such a great movie, and I loved it as a child. My daughter was fascinated with it as well. And of course, Jules Verne had predicted there was a great ocean under the Earth, as had so many writers within that hollow Earth space. And of course, with Richard Shaver and Ray Palmer and other people like that had popularized the idea into ufology. But recently, to Foot Clan's point about these type of breakaway civilizations, Hal Puthoff wrote a piece, and Hal Puthoff has had a long history of being involved in the paranormal and UFOs and the like, and he's an academic and he has a PhD in what's his doctorate in Puthoff's? I can't even remember now. But he's attached to the Stars Academy and various other things. Anyway, he wrote a piece about 2 or 3 years ago now just on the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, and not the way that John Keel might have meant ultra-terrestrials were necessarily almost as a literary device for something that was, another stranger force. He used it as the idea that ultra-terrestrials lived amongst us, much like the late Mactonies had in his book Crypto-Terrestrials. And Hal Puthoff presented a number of suggestions that there could be a few different explanations for things living amongst us. The old idea of gods and fairies and things like that. The idea of some type of modern breakaway human civilization, but that a lot of these things we had to consider when we looked at the flying saucer phenomenon or the UFO phenomenon, instead of thinking it's coming from out there, that it might be coming from here. And recently, like within the last year or two, I think 3 different academics, I can't even remember their names, so I think 2 were from Harvard and 1 was MIT, wrote a piece also about the potential that these things came from here under the seas or under the earth. And they even talked about Shaver again. To hear Richard Shaver being talked about seriously in an academic paper, not like just as a cultural moment, but as he might have, he was part of this kind of tradition that now we're looking at again. So to Foot Clan's point, there's been a number of ideas that there is a breakaway civilization.
Well, something I read, I want to say last week, were sightings of lizard men near the Black River in Wisconsin.
Wow.
Well, I was right.
Where was this? Where'd you read this in?
I read this online. I was searching for information. I came across a newspaper article. And that Black River's not that far from you.
No, it's not far from me at all. I got to be careful for, like, Black River Falls is just up the road from me.
Right. And I know, it's kind of cold for lizardmen, but maybe they're warm caves.
Well, I think I was in a cavern recently, or a cave in Wisconsin, and it has a standard temperature, I think 50 or 52 degrees all year round. Like, it doesn't matter if it's like minus 30 outside or whether it's, 90 outside. The cavern itself has that even temperature all year round. So perhaps the lizard man would be able to survive in the worst of the Wisconsin winters.
Well, we laugh,
they
but
lived under the earth.
God, so bad with names. David Icke, the world famous ex-soccer player.
Yeah, people pronounce it Ike. I've heard it pronounced hundreds of different ways.
It has many books talking about lizard men running the world, right? And we laugh, but should we be laughing? I think we need to take it harder to look at what we see around us and ask ourselves, if nothing else, what is it that I'm really seeing? What does this mean? What can we do? I think it's always a good question. What's in the sky? What's that object? What's that light? What's that whatever?
No, I think that is a very good question. And we have another question for you here from a listener, a regular listener who's been a regular listener of the show for years, I believe. I'm just trying to find it now. And we were talking about drones a little bit before, but Ken Rock's been here since the beginning. Thank you, Ken. It's lovely, always lovely to have you in the chat. And he says, so I have to ask this, and this is something we were talking about before, but I don't think we really gave an answer. He says, the lights off New Jersey, are they drones or UFOs?
I heard both things. I heard the drones. I heard the UFOs. Now, I've seen pictures that people supposedly took. Let's put some quotes on there, right? Because God only knows what they really took pictures of, or when they took these pictures. Saying, obviously, drones. I've seen big bright lights that could be street lights for all I know, photoshopped. I don't know. But it'd be interesting because when you have law enforcement, I've heard in interviews, we see law enforcement being concerned. Well, they're paying attention to them. They're telling to the National Guard what's going on. People taking interest. That interest will float up the chain of command, and somebody will have to do something to explain this is what's happening. Or we'll simply go away and we'll quit talking about it. One of the two. That's happened before, too.
I often wonder too, or recently I've wondered in the last few years, if the very language that surrounds both drones and what we used to call flying saucers or UFOs, UAPs, if it isn't used in some ways, I don't know, again, as almost part of a disinfo or a psyop or a way to confuse people. Remember when those big Chinese balloons or drones or whatever the devil they were flying across America? And there was press releases like the US government was saying, oh, UFOs and UAPs, that was the terminology they were using. And if you use that terminology, the public are instantly going to go, as many people in the UFO community did, they're going to get excited and they're going to think there's some revelation about to drop regarding disclosure. So was it just somebody who was a Pentagon spokesperson who used dodgy language? I doubt it. I think it was probably intentionally framed to be using that type of language. And then again, what's the purpose of that? Is it to confuse the American public? Is it to just create spin? Is it to create a side topic so people are talking more about UFOs and UAPs than they are about Chinese drones? Is it to future-proof against some weirdness that they know is coming? If you have that kind of conspiracy mindset, who knows? But all I know is it's very strange when you start to get this terminology used across the board for both Chinese incursions in American skies as well as potential extraterrestrial or interdimensional or whatever you want to think the flying saucers are, when the same acronym is being used for both of them. I mean, that's got to be intentional, I'm thinking. Right?
I believe it's intentional as well. I believe it's intentional. Why not spin it? Why not cause confusion? I mean, the same thing is the more these things occur, less trust that people have in government because they don't trust government. When you have people that don't trust the government over time, bad things happen. Yeah, there you go. Nancy's correct.
Yeah, Nancy Malcolm, just for the listeners, is saying the UFO community need to produce a dictionary to define all their various phrases or words so they all talk the same language. Maybe that's part of the problem.
That's something the UFO community can do. I mean, having a book out there saying these are the terms we're going to use, I think would be a good idea. Well, they would have. Why would they? Unless the drone, you have to have, under federal law, you have to certain regulations have a drone flying, right? They're not going to simply don't shoot a drone because it's not following the regulations. They can track it back. I doubt these drones are from the Ukraine. I doubt they're from the Soviet Union. I expect they're launched locally. As locally, I mean the United States.
Yeah, that was just, you were just responding to something from Nixon. Thank you for being here with us. Who said, why wouldn't they just shoot down the drones that aren't ours? And that's a good question, because remember there was that during the Biden presidency, there was a real furor about why aren't they shooting this drone, this Chinese drone down, which is traveling across the country. I remember that being an argument in the popular press, even, or at least in the conservative press, saying shoot the thing down, for goodness sakes.
Well, they didn't shoot it down because of intelligent balloon. Because we knew once we knew the balloon was from China, we knew exactly what the kind of stuff they had in it. We could feed them false information. We knew once we discovered it was from China, any place that took in that information also took in whatever else we wanted to give it. Right? Why don't we shoot down those drones? We have an airport here in Racine. Once in a while, some idiot kid will fly a drone by it against the law. They don't shoot it down because it'll go away. If necessary, if it comes back in, they'll track down the kid that's flying it. They put him in jail. Yeah. Yeah, fly a drone in the White House.
Yeah, exactly. So Greg Olson just said, try flying drones over restricted airspace and see what happens. And that's a very good point. You would assume that there would be some type of military retaliation, although there is throughout the history, in fairness, of UFOs, there are alleged reports of things which didn't resemble ours and weren't identified, and certainly weren't responding to any radio communications, zapping over military bases and zapping over nuclear installations. And whether we tried to shoot them down or not, who knows? But there are those stories, and they're fairly legendary within the history of UFO belief.
You said 2 words, legendary story. I don't want to quash anybody's thoughts in UFOs. I'm no expert. Let me point that out now. I'm no expert. I'm trying to learn. And I think for me to learn the best, I have to go back in time and see what it was and how we move forward. I mean, the thing that gets me, you have famous people we know, like Doty, when it was Wade hurt people. You know, they did benefits. They hurt someone. It drove the guy insane. But at the same time, our government shot at a woman holding a baby, shot and killed because they could. And nobody went to jail for that one either.
We had an interesting point here from Nancy Malcolm as well, and she says, I think many drones are holograms. That's interesting too.
That's right.
Certainly there's that type of technology. I do suspect that some of the things people see in the skies have been engineered those days. In fact, I think, or those ways rather, I think even in one of Vallet's early books, he talks about the ability of foreign governments even back in the day to project religious apparitions and things like that in the sky to try to confuse people. And I can only imagine that the level of that type of technology today, like I often jokingly say, if we ever, if disclosures ever forthcoming, or if I'm ever told, oh, there are alien ships hovering, or like something like in Independence Day, the movie with Will Smith, right? There are alien ships all of a sudden hovering over all the capital cities of the earth. I'm going to instantly think something like what Nancy Malcolm just said, that it's some type of, hologram, or it's some type of psyop. I'm going to be very reluctant to just go, oh, the aliens are finally here. I'm going to think maybe I'm being manipulated.
In the book that Mr. Vallet wrote called Revelations, there's a huge chapter about what happened to a bunch of poor French guys. And he talks about what happened, what they think happened, and what could have happened. And he talks about the ability that the French government had to chemically dose people and have them think whether they wanted to think. It's kind of scary.
Well, yeah, and then you add that kind of stuff into it. If you add the potential to dope people as well as to project something in front of them, I mean, there's that fear as well. Richard Doty, who you mentioned again, he's come up a few times on my show as well as other shows when I had him on Talking Weird back before we were on the Untold radio network, and I've seen him talk about in other places as well. He talked about that there was, I don't know if it was AFOSI, but it was certainly an Air Force program. So it would probably be AFOSI because they're the intelligence wing, right, of the Air Force. But there was some Air Force program anyway that was hoaxing abductions, according to Doty. And again, some people would say you don't believe anything Richard Doty says. And he said its intention wasn't to convince people that they are alien abductions. Its intention was to get information from people by making them think they were being abducted by aliens. In other words, to be used as a type of terror technique, because presumably if you wake up, and aliens have dragged you out of your bed and you're on a table in what you think's a flying saucer, you're more likely to have loose lips than if you just think it's, the US Air Force questioning you in, a nice, cozy, conference room somewhere. So his point was that these things were done to elicit information from people of interest. But if Doty's right, and if there was an arm of the U.S. military doing that, for intelligence reasons, whatever it is, it's conceivable to think that another wing of the government or another wing of another branch of the services or another agency of one of the branches of the services might not find the same wherewithal to hoax something for a very different reason. Using drugs, using actors who presented themselves as non-human, using all kinds of technology.
Well, remember MK Ultra?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what can we can make people think we want to think. I mean, we have devices now that can project a voice into your brain. They call it the voice of God. They developed it for the Iraq War, so we can get terrorists not shoot people, right? So let's say walking down the street and start hearing a voice say, "Hey, Dean, go to the liquor store and buy this book or do something, whatever that thing might be." You know, it's what it has to be from God because it's still is around you, right?
Yeah. No, agreed. I mean, there's all kinds of there's people now, Foot Clan suggesting in there about this is a long story as well, but Foot Clan is talking about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, which took place in his state. And it's interesting, of course, that Barney Hill, in his hypnosis session, suggested that the aliens look like Nazi officers. He also described them as other ways. He described them as red-headed Irishmen. He described them as, they look like they were Nazi officers. There was something very strange happening in the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, where the aliens were described in different ways by both Betty and Barney Hill, and somehow that eventually segued into the gray alien abductors we have today. I certainly know other people who've suggested that that what happened to Betty and Barney Hill was some kind of intelligence sting or some type of intelligence operation. I tend to think it was more just some type of psychological reaction to a stressful situation by a biracial married couple who were already under incredible stress, just given the nature of their relationship in those days. I don't think I need to find extraterrestrials to explain what happened to Betty and Barney Hill. And interestingly, the original psychiatrist, I think it was Benjamin Simon, who did the hypnosis. He didn't think they'd been abducted by aliens either. He thought it was something, psychological working itself out. But that's a good point, Foot Clan. That's something else which conceivably, and some people have said, seems to have been related to something more nefarious than extraterrestrials.
There's so much out there. I mean, we don't know what's all going out there. I mean, it's when I'm doing my next book that should be out before Christmas, called UFO Occults and Mysteries. We talked about the lizard men. We talked about the hollow earth. These are legends that people think happen, right? Lizard men especially. I mean, reasonable people, lots of reasonable people think that lizard men run the world. Okay? I mean, we're not talking about drunks in the bar. We're not talking about my father after a 4-day bender. We're talking about people who have 9-to-5 jobs, go home to their families, do all the good things that people should be supposed to do, but yet they believe. Oh, yeah, Aleister Crowley, my guy.
Yeah, Greg Olson makes the very valid point that the grey aliens look exactly like the demon lamb that Aleister Crowley summoned and drew a picture of. I wish I had it sitting here to flash up now, but if anybody Googles lamb Aleister Crowley, they'll find this picture, sure enough, of something that Aleister Crowley, perhaps the most famous magical worker or magician, not like a stage magician, somebody practicing the genuine magical arts, supposedly had a communication with, and it looks very much like a grey alien decades before the Betty and Barney Hill incident. So that's a very good point. So we've been talking primarily about Paranormal Files, the flying saucers are real, and we'll talk a little bit about that more just before we go, which we will be doing shortly. But just reiterate that new book that's coming out as well, because that might be out by Christmas, possibly.
UFO Cults and Mysteries.
UFO Cults and Mysteries.
Mysteries, right? It's a shorter book. It should be out before Christmas, we hope. Not kind of between Christmas and New Year. Holidays kind of suck up time quickly, it seems. We're also doing a book on Norman Baker, a crazy snake oil salesman from Arkansas.
Oh, what's that one called? The Snake Oil.
It's going to
the
be called
Snake Oil.
Norman Baker. I haven't come up with the title yet, but that's going to be who it's about.
Oh, I don't know
Norman
who he
Baker,
is. Maybe
yeah,
that's a character for another show. Since we're getting
it could
close to
be.
the.
We got his being a snake oil salesman. We got him killing people, doing cancer chores. We got the idea that his victims came back from the dead and haunt his clinic to this day. He's a crazy guy. I believe a psychopath. He probably have not necessarily kill people like Simon and Hart say, but yet his treatment of them definitely probably helped them to die. So perhaps he is a mass murderer. He's an interesting character. He died comfortably in his own bed.
What's the title of that book going to be?
I don't know. It has to be something Norman Baker in the name of it, so people come up and something about Arkansas. Arkansas is full of crazy people. You got Bigfoot. You got people like Norman Baker. You got mafia.
Well, you know who
running
else?
around.
You know who else ended up there, right?
Yeah, your guy.
Richard Shaver. I was only there in October.
Yeah.
Myself and my girlfriend Samantha, who are listening, my daughter, one of her daughters, we went down there to shoot a fairly big segment of The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. We visited Shaver's last home. We visited his grave. We met people there who knew him. But yeah, Richard Shaver, and that's where he was, I've talked about previously on this show. That was the last place he said he was abducted by the Darrow, on a hillside in Summit, Arkansas, outside of Summit, Arkansas.
I think the Darrow coming at me the other day.
You think they came? You think they did come to get you?
It must, because I got a wound in my leg about 4 inches square that won't heal.
How did that happen? Good grief!
I know, no idea. It was going on when we talked to you in Milwaukee. In any event, it won't heal. Nobody knows why. So I think it's a Darrow. I think they tried to kill me because they're scared about they're terrified about my upcoming book, UFO: A Field Investigator's Guide, which also have something that you'll be the first one to hear about. We also have plans for a UFO detector. They can build their own home.
And you were just prolific. But before we go, we should talk about your current book, which is available right now, and that's Paranormal Files. The Flying Saucers Are Real.
You can get the Critical Blast's website. You can get it on Amazon as well. It's in hardcover paperback, and Kindle. Favorite bookstore have it. Then I have it in the shelves where you can order it. If you order it runaway cheaper, you get it from Amazon. If you want me to get more of the money, you get it from the Critical Blast website. Yeah, we've got more UFO books coming out. We hope we should. We got that bigger book coming out. We hope so. We got a book coming out on cryptids in Wisconsin. All for you, Dean.
Is it just titled Cryptids in Wisconsin?
No, it'll be Cryptids in Northern Wisconsin and the UP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because
this is a very cryptid-friendly channel, the Untold Radio Network, so we'll definitely have to have you back on to talk about that one.
Well, the Lizard Men, of all the things that really puzzle me is the Lizard Men. I mean, the Lizard Men seem to be very popular around Wisconsin.
Well,
stuff.
I mean, Shaver thought there was underground civilizations here. He thought he was when he was in Amherst, just down the road from me, he thought he was on top of an ancient buried city, and he thought that there was a colony of underground Tero, who were the good underground dwellers, very nearby. That's why he chose Amherst, but he was certain that there was activity here, so who knows?
Well, speaking of someone else who got kidnapped by, or actually held captive, tried to hold captive by people on the ground, was our good guy from Murray Island, Chrisman.
Oh yeah, Fred Chrisman. He supposedly battled them in the caverns in Burma when he was a World War II pilot and got shot down.
Yeah. Popular myth, popular story.
It was an amazing story, like all of the stories which were in that magazine.
What gets me is how you can take, God knows what these guys actually saw. Like, you take a sighting, you take a tragic accident with an Air Force plane who's seen better days. You all spin all that stuff up to weird stories, but yet something happened. That other man's son who disappeared and showed up in Montana, 500 miles, 1,000 miles away, not knowing how he got there? That's weird.
Yeah, Harold Dahl, who was Chrisman's compatriot, or according to some, versions, Chrisman was Dahl's boss, and when the Men in Black came and threatened Harold Dahl in Tacoma, Washington, after he'd experienced the exploding flying saucer or flying donut outside of Maury Island, or just off the shore of Maury Island in Puget Sound, and he didn't shut up like the Man in Black told him to. Yeah, his son disappeared and woke up with amnesia multiple states away. Very strange.
Wow.
Very strange.
The whole
Well,
incident was-
sorry,
it's
you
strange.
continue. Well, no. Well, Wayne, it was a joy having you. One more time, though, tell us how folks can get your most recent book. You said it's on Amazon, and you
It's
can
on
also go.
Amazon, or you can order it at your favorite bookstore, or you can go to Critical Blast's webpage too.
Is it criticalblast.com? Do you know?
Yes, I'll do it.
Okay, criticalblast.com, and that's
And then all my
Paranormal
books can be
Files.
found on Amazon if you're interested in mafia, or interested in the gambling tips. But we'll be doing a lot more. Oh, we also have a book for you. We wrote this for you called The Pagan's Guide to Visual Gardening. That comes from, of course, watching Tony Time's The Worker Man.
Oh wow, and that's on the Critical Blast side as well.
That's not written yet. That's my next project. Because we want this out before gardening season.
My goodness, are you prolific, Wayne, or what?
I can get off Twitter and start writing. But if you want to get a hold of me, that's my Twitter up on the screen now.
So it's Clingman Doctor. It's an at Clingman Dr. So CLINGMAN DR. Clingman Doctor on X or on Twitter. Well, Wayne, thank you for coming back and chatting to me, my friend. It's always a good time.
I appreciate it a lot.
Man, and I appreciate you too. And until I get to chat to you again, Wayne, and until I get to chat to everybody else out there, please stay warm. It's cold here in the Northwoods, and keep it weird.